Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Design Your Career, which is part of our Get That Job webinar series here at the Champaign Public Library. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the career librarian here at the library, so thank you all for joining us. So as always, we mentioned that if you would like the latest library news and updates, please visit our website, champaign.org, or you can follow us on social media. You could email us at librarian@champaign.org, or you could chat with us. The library is open and we are still offering our curbside services. So again, please visit our website or give us a call for more information. Moving on to a couple of Zoom features available to you that might help during this webinar. There are some buttons or icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen, depending on your device. On the far left, you have the options that control your sound or your speaker. Moving to the right and within the center of the window includes a chat and raised hand option. You could use these options to ask questions or share any comments. I'm sure our presenter will be happy to pause for any questions, but it might be helpful to save those until the end in case they cover that item. We invite you to type your question to the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you if you prefer to speak and ask your questions. I'd also like to remind you all that our webinars are recorded, so just be mindful when you share those questions and comments. Finally, I would like to introduce our presenter and local career coach, Kevin Martlage of Nextier Advisors. Kevin has graciously presented webinars on behalf of the library. And once again, we're happy that he's joined us today. So Kevin, thank you for being with us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue to present these with for the library and for everybody that's online. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see my screen, and I'll give you a kind of a brief introduction. My name is Kevin Martlage, and I work with people all over the country, whether it be high school students trying to make that next decision after high school to go into the trades or to college or the military or whatever, to individuals that are seeking that first job after they've gotten out of college or high school, and then certainly working with mid career professionals and people that maybe want to take that next step in their career. What does that look like, and helping them kind of strategically design that and understand what's next for them in their career, both if they want to make that career change or continue on with what they're doing. So what we're going to do today is kind of go through a little bit of the process I go through with people to intentionally design your career. And so, the first couple questions I like to ask people when I start doing work with them, and I think it's important you ask yourself when you start to look at your career, whether it's finding that first job or moving on, is where are you in your current career journey? Are you looking for that first job? Are you looking for that next job, perhaps? Or maybe you have a job, however, you don't find it interesting or engaging anymore, and you're wanting to make some kind of change to make sure that you are engaged in finding your job interesting. Or you like my job, you find it engaging and interesting, and there are opportunities for me to advance, but I'm not sure what's next. So typically the people that I work with, they kind of fall into those four categories. And then we also have the other category there that maybe there's just some other reasons out there that you're trying to, advance your career, make those changes in your career. And so those are all things that we're doing, or that we'd like to talk about. So, I'll ask you to kind of answer to yourself, where are you in your career journey? And if you don't know, that's fine. Perhaps maybe this process we go through today will help you answer that. And then the next question I like to ask people is, what questions about your career are you trying to answer? Are there jobs out there that I might like better than the one I have now? What other kinds of work can I do now that I've maybe lost my job, or maybe you've been forced to make a change in your career for whatever reason? What else is out there that I can do? How can I make my current job more interesting? Where do I start my career search? That's always a big question, is, I know what I want to do, or I have an idea, but I just don't know what resources are there to be using, and how do I start that search process and make it effective? How can I get paid to do the things I do for fun? That's always a cool thing, that as I'm working with people and we try to find that next job or that next step in their career, we all like to have fun, and we like to have an engaging career and a career that keeps our interest, and it allows us to get up every morning and just be excited about what we're doing. And so that's a goal that I have for everybody, is to find that sustainable, interesting career that allow you to have fun while you're making money and providing for your family or friends or whatever it is that your situation is in. What can I do after I retire? I also work with individuals about, long-term planning after they retire, or they step away from their current job and maybe want to do, something that is more for fun. Maybe they have income coming in, and it's like, what else can I do to make that impact on people's lives, or whatever it might be that they're doing. So, and then obviously that other category. So those are two very important questions I like to kind of start with as we have this career discussion. Obviously, being a webinar, we're not going to go into those individually with everybody today, but I think they're very important questions I'd like you to start asking yourself. So what's it mean to become intentional? We talk about in this webinar, intentionally designing your career path. So I like this saying by Peter Drucker: the best way to predict the future is to create it. We want to be very intentional as we're approaching our career. We want to be very intentional as we're making those decisions about where we want to go next. And we want to be very intentional about, asking ourselves those previous two questions, so that we're designing our career and strategically advancing our career to gain the most that we possibly can and to reach our goals that we might have. So if you look at, the definition of intentional in Webster's dictionary, it's done by intention or design, or it's done in a deliberate way, and it's not accidental. I can tell you that, if I look back at my 30+ career, or your career, there were some advancements in my career, or even some setbacks in my career that I like to say they were accidental. I maybe fell into that next job, or I happened to, just happened to know somebody that was looking for somebody that had my background that I was doing. And so those are okay. I advanced my career, throughout those 30 years, 25, 30 years, but it was kind of accidental. And also, look back and say, well, what if I was more intentional? And I took that time every year, every couple years, or even as I was going through college, and getting out into the real world, and really designing, okay, well, what's next? What do I want to do next? What am I enjoying about my job now that I want to continue doing? What are some of the areas about my job that maybe I'm struggling with, I need to advance or go seek out some more knowledge to be more effective in my job? And what are some things, some of those jobs that we've all probably had or will have someday, where you're just not engaged like you used to be? And so what do I need to do intentionally to adjust that? And so I can continue to make sure that I'm making that, or providing that full impact I can for my employer, or who I'm working with, or the people I'm working with. So intentionality is very important when you talk about strategically designing your career and those next steps. So that's where we kind of come in at Nextier Advisors. We like to, our unique purpose is enhance performance, teamwork, and careers through intentional conversations and solutions. And I focus on career development by having awareness of your personal interests and styles, and how is that helpful in identifying rewarding career opportunities, work activities, and leadership enhancements that can lead to that more engaging and intentional career. And my goal for everybody I work with is that you're understanding what those things are, and you're not like me, where 30 years later you're finally doing those things that you always wanted to do in your life, but never really understood how to get there. I want to help people understand now where you want to be, and help you identify those steps necessary to achieve those goals. So some of the goals for today's webinar is we're going to begin to help you identify the following. Who are you in terms of your personal interests and your goals? What is it that you value? What do you like to do? Which environments allow you to be the most productive? And start to identify some of your best skills in terms of what you can bring to the table and transfer to some of those jobs based on what you've done in the past. And then we'll also start to develop an action plan for next steps in your career. And then also I'll share with you some tools you can use as a resource in your career journey if you're interested in it. All free resources and some things that you can use. And all this is done to help you. You need to understand you before becoming truly intentional about your career. So we'll go through those steps today. So self-awareness is very important, as I mentioned. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see, as Henry David Thoreau says. And I think that's very important as you start to look at your career. It's what can you start to visualize and see as your career goals, and then how do we go about obtaining those goals and the different steps. So one way that I like to approach career coaching is using the Myers-Briggs Strong Interest Inventory, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But when you look at, occupational, Holland codes, as they're called, there's 6 different categories that people typically fall into when you look at, excuse me, when you look at your interests. And so some of those things are, the first one is realistic. And so that Holland code, realistic, we simply say those are the doers. Those are the people that like to get out there, get their hands dirty, actually be out there physically doing the work and getting things done. And so we're going to go through these 6 categories here over the next few slides. And I'm going to explain these to you. And as we're going through these, I'd like for you to kind of mentally jot down the 1, 2, or 3 codes that maybe resonate with you the most. And then we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. So realistic is the first one. The second one is investigative, which we like to call those the thinkers. These are the people that are really engaged with those things that allow them to be very analytical. They like to work through things and take in all the data and make some decisions on those things. And so the people that fall into those categories are very analytical in how they approach their job, and they're very interested in those types of jobs. Artistic, we call the creators. These are the people that fall into this category are, they love to use their creativity, and they love to express themselves in creative manners, whether that be, through the arts or through writing or something like that. And so the people that fall in this category are very creative in how they approach things. Social, we call the helpers. So the motivator for these individuals, anything they can do to help others, they find very interesting, and they're very engaged in those types of activities by helping other people. And so we say that they fall into the social category when it comes to the Holland codes. The next one is enterprising, which we call the persuaders. And the people that fall into these categories, they're very interested in helping to lead others achieve their goals. And so they like to typically be in positions of leadership type roles. They enjoy being in charge of, say, a group of individuals and helping them understand how they can achieve those goals and move towards those goals for the organization and them individually. And so enterprising Holland code is what we call the persuaders. And then the last one is conventional, which we call the organizers. And so people approach things in this category. They're very methodical in how they approach things. They like things to be very well organized, everything in its place, and they still like to kind of be in charge, but maybe not necessarily in charge of people, but in charge of processes and things like that they go through. And so these are the 6 Holland codes that I typically like to work with people on in helping you to understand what your interests are. And then we start to tie those interests with various jobs that may be out there that fall in those categories, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. And so we put these on a hexagon like this because the closer these items are, closer these items are in the hexagon, the more in common they have. And the further apart they are, the least in common they have, or the less in common they have. And so they're on this hexagon for a reason. And we'll get through some of those differences and similarities here in just a few minutes. So as we go through these next slides, this is where I know, being a webinar, we're not going to have a lot of interaction here on these, but I want you to, as I'm going through and describing these categories even more detail, I'd like for you to take those mental notes, and at the end, write down the 1, 2, or 3 categories that you think resonate with you the most, and then we'll take that to the next step as we go through. So when you look at the realistic category, the doers, realistic people are primarily interested in certain things, and they like to work in different environments. And so as you're looking at these pictures, I'll let you kind of answer to yourself, what are those things that these people might be interested in? And what are those environments where they may enjoy working and find those to be the most engaging? And so they're generally interested in mechanical construction and repair activities. They're interested in nature and the outdoors, providing public safety and physical activities, working with tools, machines, and equipment. And so we say that the people that fall into this category, their career motivator is using physical skill. So anything that they can do in terms of their interest level, falling into those categories that allow them to use their hands, use their physical skill. They're in the mechanical construction repair kind of activities. The people that have interest in those categories typically fall into this category, and then we're able to, relate out some jobs that they may pursue with these things as we start to look at specific jobs. So that would be a little more detail into the realistic category. Next category is the investigative or the thinkers, and you can see by these pictures some of the jobs that may come to mind regarding what investigative people are interested in and what kind of environments they might like to work in. But they're generally interested in activities related to science and math. So that data and being able to do calculations and things like that, and be very methodical in terms of how they approach making decisions and things like that. They like to have all the data there with them so that they can analyze and trying to discover those things. They like gathering information, uncovering new facts or theories, analyzing and interpreting data. They're very scientific and inquiring, enjoy abstract and ambiguous problems. So people that fall in this category, the bigger the problem that they're faced with, the more engaged and intrigued they are with that problem because they like to try to figure that out. And they're going to do everything they can to gather in other information and data to help make decisions on that and to help solve that problem. And so the career motivator for people that fall into this category is what we call analyzing. Anything they can do to analyze that situation or use those analytical type skills in their job is going to be very important for them, and they're going to find very engaging and intriguing. The next category, artistic, the creators. The people that fall into this category and environments are pretty straightforward in my mind, but the artistic people are generally interested in visual arts, performing arts, culinary arts, writing. They like observing the arts and participating in them. They express their artistic interest through leisure and work activities. So anything that they can do where they have that interest, where they can express themselves creatively is very important to the people that maybe be in this category. And this category, more than any of the others, there's a lot of overlap between their personal life and their work life, and that if there's things that they do in their personal life that they really enjoy, there's also going to be those things in their work life that they're going to try to engage and be a part of. And so they seek out those opportunities that will allow them to express their creativity. And so career motivator in here is expressing creativity. Next category is social. So social people are interested in a lot of different things, anything that they can do to help other people. And they like to work in a variety of different environments. And the big motivator for them in this category is they're generally interested in being with other people. And so unlike the kind of the investigative side that we just talked about, where people like to be very analytical and trying to figure out things and gathering that data, the individuals that maybe fall into the social category, they like to, and they enjoy working with other people and helping other people and having that communication and that collaboration with others. So they enjoy working in groups, sharing responsibilities and communicating with others. They like to solve problems through discussions of feelings and interactions with others. And they're generally interested in being with other people because their interests are about helping others. And so to help others effectively, you want to be with those other people. And so you're looking for those environments that allow you to be in that kind of environment, because you're going to find that very engaging and very intriguing in your interest. And so their career motivators would be helping others. Anything you can do to help other people and to be in those situations is going to be interesting to you. The last two that we have, enterprising, which is the persuaders. Again, we're looking at, whoop, are we there? Sorry, somebody's jumping on. As you're looking through the enterprising category, enterprising people are generally interested in persuading and leading others. They seek positions of leadership, power, and status, and they enjoy working with other people and leading them towards organizational goals and economic success. And so the people that may fall into this category, or the interest types that fall into this category, they like to be in those positions of power, which not in a bad way, like I have to be in control, but they enjoy being in that situation where they can use their skills and the things they're interested in to lead other people to help attain organizational goals or even economic success, or help advance maybe a group that they're working with, or people that they work with. And that can be both, in a nonprofit and a for-profit situation. Maybe it's volunteer work that you even enjoy doing. People that are in the enterprising category, they're like, hey, I'm in charge of this volunteer group, and we're going to, organize everything, get everything together, and go achieve this goal or do this thing that we've been volunteering to do. And so the career motivator for individuals in this category is persuade and influence. So you can really think about maybe some jobs that are out there that would allow people with these interest levels to be able to do those things and to use those things, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. The last one is conventional. These are the organizers. And so you can see people that fall into this category in terms of interest level. They like to be in very organized type environments. They're generally interested in activities that require attention to organization, data systems, detail, and accuracy. They tend to work very well in large organizations, and they use information to efficiently organize and solve problems. And so people that are most engaged in this category really like to have those environments that are very process driven, are very organized, and allows them, much like on the persuader side, to kind of be in charge of those things and to do those things. And so they really enjoy kind of organizing data and information to help solve problems and to make sure things are in order so other people can also solve those problems. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of the jobs that may fall into this category as well. So people in this category, their career motivator is organizing. So if you look at the 6 categories that we just went over, you have those 6 there. We have a very brief description of what those categories are. And based on the strong interest inventory that I do with Myers-Briggs, most people are a combination of 2 or 3 of these themes. And so I would ask for you now just to kind of maybe a scratch piece of paper or something, write down maybe the 1, 2, or 3 categories that you think best describes you in terms of your interest and what you enjoy doing and the types of environments that those people like to typically work in. So I'll give you a minute or two to kind of write those down. And if you're unsure, that's perfectly okay too. But hopefully there's 1 or 2 that are kind of sticking out at you that said, hey, that kind of describes me and my interest level and the types of environments I'd like to work in. And I think it's very important as you're doing that and kind of reflecting on that, there's not one category here that's better than the others. Yep, we can certainly put the categories in the chat. I can do that here. There's a question that came in from one of the attendees. So we can put those in there, no problem. And so one category is not better than the other. It's all about which one kind of makes most sense to you, is one of those things that resonates with you the most. So I'll give you about 30 seconds while I type these into the chat here for the one attendee, and you can kind of write down which one you think is best for you. All right. So now that you have those categories, we then take those 6 categories, and through the strong interest inventory, we can kind of break those categories down into what we call basic interest scales. And so the basic interest scales kind of take those big categories and they whittle it down a little bit more to get a little bit more specific. And as you go through the strong interest inventory process, it goes down 1 or 2 more levels even. But we're just going to stay at the top here with the Holland codes and the basic interest scales. So as you look at the 6 categories on the screen, you have the investigative, realistic, conventional, enterprising, social, and artistic. You can see some of the basic interest scales that fall under each one of those. So for instance, under investigative, we may break that down into 4 other categories where there's science, research, medical science, and mathematics, right? So those could be kind of 4 subcategories under investigative that as you're starting to look at careers and starting to look at things that you might find very interesting in trying to identify what those careers are, or even that next step in your current career, if you fall into this category, you could look in some of the subcategories like science, research, medical science, and mathematics if you wanted to. And like I said, with a strong interest inventory process, it would break those down even more. Realistic, it kind of goes down into mechanics and construction, computer hardware and electronics, military, protective services, nature and agriculture, and athletics. Hold on just a second here. I've got a chat coming in. Let's see if we can get these in here again. Sorry, I'm just going to list out the categories in the chat here again. Sorry about that. All right. Sorry, I think I just sent it to 1 or 2 people instead of everybody. So there you go. My apologies for that. So you can see as we go into the basic interest scales, you have, breaking them down even farther. So if you were to look at the 1 or 2 or even 3 categories that you just self-identified through our brief description here a few minutes ago, you could then say, okay, if I fall into that conventional category where I have a lot of similar interests to people that maybe fall into that category, similar interests to the types of environments those people like to work at, I really can identify with that career motivator under conventional. So that's all great. But what are some areas or some jobs that I can now go kind of seek out that use some of those conventional interests and have some of those conventional interests and environments in there? And so you might start to look at office management, taxes and accounting, programming and information services, finance and investing. So those are all kind of some basic interest categories that use or have similar interests to people that are in the conventional area. And we'll get to some tools here later on that'll help you dive into these even more as you're starting to look at that. So that's one way that you can start to look at your personal interests and then try to tie it out into different groups or categories or subcategories of jobs that you may want to look at as you're starting to kind of strategically design that career. Right. So once we kind of have that, and like I said, if we were going through the full kind of strong interest inventory, process, there would be a report that would be provided to you after you take an online assessment. But even given your brief knowledge of the interest and some of those subcategories that we have, we're going to then start to define what I like to call the 4 career W's. And the 4 career W's is where we're going to start to help you really understand you before you can become intentional about your career. And so that first career W is, if I were to ask you, I would describe myself as, who are you, right? So if you had to look at your career and if you had somebody who said, what makes you you? And what are some things how would you describe yourself? What would you write? And so I always encourage people as you start to, think about you internally and how that translates out into a sustainable and fulfilling and engaging career, you have to be able to describe yourself. And so you might want to write a sentence about, I would describe myself as very trustworthy, very whatever it may be. You can come up with a bunch of different adjectives and things that kind of fall into some of those interest categories that you talk about. So I think it's very important that you start to write out your impact statement, so to speak, where it says, I would describe myself as. So a couple things that why we use the 4 career W's, and we start with this one, is if you can go through these 4 career W's and start to put language around all of these, it's going to help you as you start to get into that interview stage, as you start to write that cover letter, as you start to update your resume. You're going to be able to use some of these key words and this key terminology that you would use to describe yourself that would translate over to those things. It's also going to help you as you can start to look internally to describe yourself using these 4 career W's. It's going to help you start to talk about yourself a little bit. And when you're in that interview, people I work with, one of the most common things they have issues with are they have a great story to tell, but when it comes to that interview, they clam up, or they're not comfortable in articulating some of the great things they've done in their career. And so there's some challenges there to really get that across to the person that you're interviewing or that you're being interviewed by. And so we go through these 4 career W's to help start to put some of that language around those things. The second career W is what I value is. What do I value in a job? And so I was talking with some people the other day about their career. It's difficult to, think about and take some time to talk about what I value. We obviously all want to make money. We obviously all want to be able to provide for ourselves and our family and our group that we work with or that we're around all the time. We all want to have a great work-life balance and so forth. But what is it that you value? It's very important that we start to, identify these things that we value in a job, so we can start to talk about that, and then to also start to seek out those jobs that will allow us to value those, to engage in those things that we value as well. The third one is the what. I would enjoy spending my work time doing what? What do I like to do? And this is where we really start to talk about, what are those things you're interested in? What are those things that you enjoy doing? And how can we identify and translate those things over to an actual job and career, and to continue to engage those things in our career? The where. I would like to work in. Which environments allow me to be the most productive? And so that's the fourth of the 4 career W's, is that we now have talked about, we can describe ourselves, we can identify the things that we value, we understand what we enjoy doing during work time, what we don't. And now we're trying to put some language around the environments that allow you to be the most productive. And so there's some steps and some things that we can go through to continue to do that as well. And then the last piece, which isn't part of the 4 career W's, but we want to start to identify your skills. So what am I good at doing, right? So I can describe myself. I found this job that, we have some of the organizations that have some of the similar values. It allows me to do some of these things I enjoy doing. It's in a great environment. Now, what skills can I bring to the table? And so how can I outline those skills and list those, so then I can start seeking those jobs that allow me to do those things. So let's use these 4 career W's and even the skills to start to identify some potential jobs that you might want to start looking at. So after you go through this process and you've really identified these things, you can start using I would describe myself as is, what jobs might allow me to be who I am? So instead of just picking up the one ads or being on Monster or Indeed and just randomly looking for jobs, let's start to list out some jobs that I know of, or maybe that I want to pursue if it was an open book. Which ones are going to allow me to be who I am after I've written down what I've described? And so that's going to help us to strategically kind of streamline those things and those jobs. So we're just not looking at every job out there. We're being a little bit more intentional about what those jobs are. what I value is what jobs might have the same shared values as I'm looking for. So again, we're trying to narrow those lists of jobs that we're going to seek out, or that next step down, by looking at not only what jobs allow me to be who I am, but what has the same shared values. And this one may take a little bit more time to investigate some of those jobs, because you're going to have to really start to look at, what are some of the organizations that are out there? What do they value? What kind of environments might they, or what kind of things might they do for their employees and so forth. But at a high level, you want to start looking at, what are some of those organizations that I can seek out to see if they have jobs that have maybe some similar values as I have on. The next one, I would enjoy spending my work time. What jobs might provide me the opportunity to do what I love doing? And so if it was an open book and I'm just looking at whatever jobs are out there, what jobs or organizations can I seek out to investigate further that allow me to do the things that I love doing? And so for me, I love doing like this career coaching and things. So I may look for organizations just like the library that offers, public service like this to help people with their careers that I may be able to get involved with and do things. I may seek out the University of Illinois because they have a career department. And so is there some things I could do there? Or maybe there's a local high school or even a middle school that I can engage with to help students understand their career and to enhance the career development processes that maybe they already have in place. And so that's why you can start to look at, if you're listing out the things you enjoy doing, well, let me think outside the box a little bit and how can I go about doing those things? Same thing with I would like to work in. What jobs might provide the best environment for me? And so, I can remember when I got out of college, I started right into retail as I was starting to find that first job and so forth. And it was great. It paid the bills for the time being, but I just did not enjoy that environment like that. And so I knew if I was more intentional back then, instead of staying in that career for 4 or 5 years, I could have maybe started to get a little more aggressive and intentional on finding that other environment or that other organization that would allow me to be more productive than it was, when I was there just out of college, just looking for that first job. And so be very selective in terms of, let's really look at the environments. And that may be some extra calls you have to make to people. It may be, reaching out to somebody that maybe works in that organization to find out what that looks like. And so forth. But it also will help you as you're starting to identify what those environments look like to be most productive. As you get into those job interviews, that will help you create some questions that you can ask the person interviewing you about what's a typical day look like. Tell me how you, train or onboard your new employees. What do the work groups look like? What's communication look like between myself and my manager? Just to make sure that, as you're going through that interview is just as much them making sure you're a good fit for their organization as it is you making sure they're a good fit for you personally, to allow you to be the most productive. And then, what am I good at? What jobs will allow me to use my skills? And so this is very important. And there's a variety of different ways. There's actually another webinar I've done for the library that's called Identifying Your Transferable Skills. That talks about how you can go about identifying what skills you can bring to the table, and what skills you're really good at that will allow you to use your skills in that job. And so again, instead of just going out and looking for jobs, generic jobs that are out there, what's available, what's not, you can now become more intentional by looking at, hey, these are some skills that I have, and therefore here's some jobs that allow me to use those skills so I can be very engaged in those things. So what about those of you that may be on the call that are looking about what's that next step in my career? And so this is a very interesting one. So everything up to this point has just been kind of about, okay, let's go find that new job. But what about those individuals that are out there that, hey, I'm trying to make that next step of my career. I want to do something else or continue to advance my current career that I'm in. You can use these same 4 questions in your skills to do that. And so, if you're looking at, I would describe myself as who you are. If you're wanting to take that next step in your career, you're maybe using that information a little differently, where you could say, how have I grown professionally and personally since I've been in my current job, or since I've, up to this point in my career. And so that's going to help you to, see if maybe if you're answering these 4 career W's, 5 years ago, it may be a little different, where now you've been in a career and you're wanting to make that next step. What have I done to grow professionally and personally during that point in time? And how can I use that information to now strategically take that next step in my career? Same thing with values. Have my professional and personal values remained the same, or have they changed? So a lot of times, your personal values may change or fluctuate, but primarily they're going to stay the same through your whole life, perhaps, or through your career. But I think it's very important that every year or two, you're sitting down and asking about, have my professional and personal values changed, or have they remained the same? If they remain the same, great, everything needs to stay the same. But you know what? Maybe some things have changed, or maybe I become more aware of some things, and so that's maybe changed some of my personal values in certain areas or whatever. And so you need to ask yourself, has that changed, or have they stayed the same? And how can I use that information to take that next step in my career? Same thing about spending your work time. What about my job do I still enjoy, and what would I change? And so I had a mentor once that told me a few years back that, they were at a certain organization for 30 some years and retired. And I was like, how did you stay engaged, during that entire 30-year period? Because it's not very common that people stay that long at one organization. They said, I always ask myself a couple questions every couple years. I said, do I still enjoy what I'm doing? If I could answer yes, then great. I'm sticking around and continuing on. Or they said, what would I change about my job, and can I change those things? And so they would ask themselves those 2 questions. And if they were ever asking themselves or answering no, they would then look at things they could do to change that situation. Or, okay, well, maybe I've achieved everything I can at this level in this part of the organization. Maybe I need to go search for something over here that allow me to continue to be engaged and very interested in what I'm doing. And so I think it's very healthy, whether you're starting out looking for that new job, or once you get that first job and you're in there for a while, you're constantly going back and asking yourself these things, because that's how you're going to be able to adjust and strategically align things to make sure that you're always engaged and remain interested in that career. Same thing, does my current environment still support me in being productive? I think that's an important thing. There could be some things that maybe you're not getting challenged enough in your current job and you want to be more challenged, or maybe you become too comfortable and things have been kind of stagnant in that job. And so, asking yourself, is the current environment still supportive in me being productive? Perhaps maybe you have a new boss, perhaps a new team has come in, perhaps you've had to reorganize some things. All certainly common things that happen in business, but at the same time, there's things that if we're being intentional about our career, there's only certain things that you may be able to change or adjust. And so if that environment is no longer being productive for you, and you're having those conversations, maybe there's some things you can do to look for other advancements in your career that'll get you back into those environments that are more productive. And then your skills. What newly developed skills do I have? Can I use those skills in a new position? So hopefully, if you're in that engaging organization, in that engaging career, there's opportunities for you to continue to develop your understanding and your skill set. Maybe you've been able to achieve some certifications, maybe you've been able to achieve some additional schooling or education. And then how can you use that to intentionally take that next step in your career? And ideally, you're having those conversations with your manager throughout your career saying, hey, here's where I want to be in 3 years. Here's where I want to be in 5 years. How can we work together and develop that educational development plan to help me achieve those career goals? And so basically, there's 2 separate ways you can kind of use these 4 career W's in your skill set to either take that first step into your job, find that next job, or to maybe take that next step in your career and advance on to the next thing that you're going to be doing. So before I go into resources and tools, I don't know if there's any questions that may be coming in. You can certainly put that into the chat system. And if not, then we can continue to move on. But I like to kind of pause here just to see if there's any questions.
I don't think there's any questions at the moment.
Okay, I will move on. So what are some resources and tools that we have out there? So one I've mentioned a little bit is the Nextier Career Awareness Program that uses the strong interest inventory and the Myers-Briggs MBTI platforms to help you make satisfying decisions about your potential career next steps. And so that's kind of digging in more to the Holland codes, the basic interest scales, and some of those other things that we've talked about today by taking an online assessment that will allow you to kind of get some information based on the Myers-Briggs strong interest inventory. And then having this personal awareness will help you identify those rewarding career opportunities and work activities. And so here at the end, I'll share some more information about that. That's one resource that's out there if you'd be interested in. We can do that, and I can work directly with you on diving deeper into your personal interests and styles while guiding you through all the steps of your career journey that we've kind of touched upon today. But even if you don't, take advantage of the Career Awareness Program, the information I've shared with you today can be very helpful in helping you at least put some specifics around your career journey and some language around your career journey, and to kind of look at some opportunities maybe out there a little bit different way, instead of just maybe searching for job titles on Indeed, or searching for whatever it might be on like Monster or whatever. And so here's some more information on the strong interest inventory. It gives you a little bit of all the details that we talk about. So it breaks those Holland codes into your interest scales, your occupational scales, which actually give you some specific jobs that may have some of those interests in there. It talks about your personal style skills. So what kind of risks do you like to take? How do you like to learn? So it really just gives you that holistic view of your personal interests and how we can tie those out to things if you're interested. Another free resource is the ONET, and you can see on here it's www.onetonline.org. And this is a website that is free to everybody. You can go out there right now and do it and look at it, but it's ran by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it has so much information about every job you could ever think of. And as you go there, you can, this is one here. So a summary report for public relations and fundraising managers. So you can see it talks about typical tasks that this person would do. It has knowledge, has some details, some typical work activities, what kind of education you might need, your interest. Some of it even has wages and salary type information. It doesn't for everything. But it's a really good resource as you're starting to, research some jobs or look at some things that are out there. You can go out here and kind of do some more research on your own to see if you have some skills that match up, or if you're going to have to get some different education to pursue those things and so forth. The other cool thing is if you use this advanced search button here, you can actually search for jobs and job categories based on those Holland codes. So for instance, as we went through there and did your kind of just individual kind of review and self-reflection as to which Holland codes made sense to you. If you happen to be conventional and enterprising, you can actually go in and search for jobs based on those Holland codes, and it'll give you all these jobs. And you can put in 2 or 3 Holland codes if you have different combinations and so forth. So just a really good resource I encourage you to go check out. If you happen to go through the strong interest inventory process, it all links out to this, so you can, then look at your results and go right to it. But I'd encourage you to go out there today and take a look at it because there's just a wealth of information out there that would allow you to help you continue to be intentional about these things. Another thing which Jordan is going to email to all the attendees afterwards is a career awareness worksheet. And so this is something that I go over with all of my clients that I work with, that we're going to provide to you, that will help you outline and document those 4 career W's. It'll help you identify what your top 5 skills are so you can write them down. It can help you look at, okay, so based on all this, what are some potential occupations I could pursue that allow me to use those skills and to use those 4 career W's, and then your next steps. And I think the biggest thing with career development and identifying strategically what's next in your career is you have to hold yourself accountable to a process. And so if you have something similar to this that has your 4 career W's there, has your skills there, and you've gone through some of the steps to strategically identify some occupations that allow you to use those things, set yourself some deadlines, hold yourself accountable to the process, and say, okay, I'm going to research these 3 jobs. I'm going to do it by next Friday. I'm going to, reach out to somebody at this organization and talk to them about what it's like to work there at the Champaign Public Library. And I'm going to do that by the end of, October. Whatever it might be, you got to hold yourself accountable, and you have to make sure that you have some kind of process in place that'll allow you to continue to do that strategically, and to continue to do those things. So just a little tool that we'll send out afterwards to all the attendees. And my contact information is here as well. If you need copies of it or need some help going through that, we can go through that. And then I also want to offer for anybody that's on the call today, a free 30-minute career coaching call if you're interested. And so Jordan will also be sending out a link to my calendar system. I'd love to take 30 minutes and even a little longer if we need to just hear your story, see if there's anything I can do to help guide you through your career journey, and also to see if you have certainly any questions about anything that we covered today or any of the other webinars that are out there that I've done for the public library. I'd be more than happy to offer you that 30-minute career coaching session. And if nothing else, just to continue to build your network and my network, and continue to help you and whoever else do whatever I can to help you reach those career goals and to strategically walk through that career journey that you're all taking. So with that, I will kind of open it up to questions. I think we've covered everything that I wanted to cover today, and I really appreciate everybody joining the webinar. And so at this point in time, I'll open up to any questions, and if not, we can end the call. So.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That was great. As Kevin mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you prefer to ask your questions. So here's my contact information. If you didn't catch Kevin's, you can email me here and I can relay any of your questions to Kevin. Let me make sure I can still see everyone. And like Kevin said, I'll be sure to email everyone that's attended today with all the information that he shared during this webinar. Let's see here. So our next webinar will be next Tuesday. It'll be Job Search 101. It'll be Tuesday, September 14th at 10 a.m. And that will be presented by my colleague, Kat Purcell. And once again, that will be a webinar. So please find the event on our website, champaign.org/events, to sign up to receive your Zoom link. And of course, we hope that you'll consider attending more webinars and workshops. We have a lot more related to our career webinars. I have the rest of the September webinars listed here, but we do have more webinars related to our business series, our technology series, crafty adults, writers workshops, our financial series. So please take a look at our events calendar for more information. And then if you didn't catch Kevin's information or my contact information, you could always just email librarian@champaign.org, and we'll be sure to connect you with the right person. And that's all I have. Once again, thank you, Kevin, for your time. Thank you all for joining us. I had to switch computers. We were having some technical difficulties. I don't see any questions, so I think we can go ahead and end the webinar. I hope everyone enjoys their morning.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.